I didn't lose my job. I lost my family the moment I realized my father had been quietly siphoning value from my work while smiling across the dinner table. My brothers were getting promoted off systems I built, and I was being paid just enough to stay grateful and silent. And the second I stopped asking for fairness and started reading contracts instead, everything they believed was untouchable began to crack. Because betrayal hurts, but betrayal disguised as love rewires you forever. My name is Linnea Carter, and for most of my life, I believed that loyalty would eventually be rewarded. That if I stayed late, fixed problems before anyone noticed, absorbed stress without complaining, and protected the family brand at all costs, someone would finally see me and say, "You matter here." I grew up in Boston, inside a family where success was inherited, masculine, and loudly celebrated. My father, Richard Carter, founded Carter and Vale Events, a high-end firm that managed political fundraisers, corporate galas, and elite weddings for people whose names opened doors. My older brothers, Nathan and Cole, were groomed as successors, always visible, always introduced as leaders, while I stayed behind the scenes, doing the work that kept the company alive. I wrote production timelines, negotiated vendor contracts, solved emergencies at 2 in the morning, smoothed over mistakes that could have ended relationships, and handled clients when tensions were high and lawsuits felt close. But on paper, I barely existed. My father insisted I remain classified as an independent contractor, no title, no equity, no benefits, always explaining it as flexibility, experience, or protection, and I believed him because I wanted to belong. I watched my brothers receive credit for projects they barely understood, while I absorbed responsibility without recognition. Family dinners were quiet lessons in hierarchy. My father praised his son's leadership while casually overlooking my contribution. And when I finally asked about a promotion, he smiled and said I was indispensable exactly where I was. It sounded like appreciation until I realized it meant I was too useful to elevate, too reliable to respect, and too conditioned to question it. I wasn't overlooked. I was positioned, and I didn't see the cage because it was built out of familiarity and trust. If this story resonates, like, subscribe, and stay with me. The shift didn't happen in a dramatic explosion. It happened quietly, during a late-night budget review when I noticed inconsistencies that didn't make sense, vendor payouts that were delayed while executive compensation increased, reimbursements denied to me while bonuses were approved elsewhere. So I asked for access to payroll documentation under the excuse of forecasting expenses. And when I finally saw the numbers, the ground dropped out from under me. My brothers were earning over $200,000 a year with full benefits, equity options, and profit participation, while I was making $52,000 with no health insurance, no retirement, and no legal claim to the company I kept afloat. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I went numb. The next morning, I confronted my father calmly, assuming there was a mistake, but there wasn't. He told me clients trusted male leadership more, that optics mattered, that my role was supportive by nature. And when I pointed out that I was doing most of the operational work, he told me work didn't equal ownership. Then came the moment that broke something inside me. When one of my brothers missed a 6-figure payment deadline that could have triggered litigation, my father asked me to quietly take responsibility, saying my name wasn't public-facing, and protecting the company meant protecting my brothers. That's when it became clear this wasn't favoritism or misunderstanding. It was intentional exploitation. I wasn't family in the structure. I was insurance, disposable but necessary. And that night, I went home and read my independent contractor agreement line by line, not emotionally, but methodically. And that's when I noticed what they never had: an intellectual property assignment clause, meaning every framework, system, and protocol I created legally belonged to me. If you're still here, like, subscribe, and keep listening. I didn't quit. I didn't threaten. And I didn't warn anyone, because silence is powerful when people mistake it for obedience. I met with an intellectual property attorney in Cambridge, a woman who had seen this pattern before, and she confirmed what I suspected. My classification saved the company money for years, but it also meant they never owned the operational backbone of their business. We filed copyright protections quietly. I incorporated my own firm, Atlas North Events, and I waited. My father assumed my compliance had returned, that I had accepted my place again, and that assumption cost him everything, because months later, Carter and Vail landed their largest contract ever, a global innovation summit hosted at a luxury hotel with investors, media, and political figures in attendance. Every operational system running that event was mine, and they used it without permission. During a scheduled transition between presentations, the production feed, legally controlled by my IP framework, paused, and a queer compliance notice appeared stating the material was owned by Atlas North Events and was being used without authorization. There was no chaos, no shouting, just confusion and immediate concern. I was invited into a private room with legal teams present, and I explained calmly that I was no longer affiliated with Carter and Vail, that my work had been misappropriated, and that continuing without resolution would expose them to serious liability. Funding conversations paused, contracts were reviewed, and confidence evaporated in real time, because investors don't fear conflict, they fear undisclosed risk. If this is hitting home, like, subscribe, and stay with the story. Carter and Vail didn't collapse overnight. It unraveled slowly under audits, legal pressure, and reputational damage. Clients quietly withdrew. Partners asked questions no one wanted to answer. And within a year, the company that once dominated elite events no longer existed. My brothers blamed me for being disloyal. My father told anyone who would listen that I betrayed the family. But what he never admitted was that he taught me exactly how power works. Atlas North Events became profitable in its first year, not because I destroyed anything, but because clients followed competence, consistency, and trust, the same things I had provided all along. Losing my family hurt more than losing the job ever could. There were nights I questioned whether winning was worth the cost, but I learned something critical in the process. Silence isn't weakness. Silence is observation, preparation, and leverage. When someone profits from you staying quiet, the moment you understand the rules, you stop asking for permission and start choosing yourself. And that's not betrayal. That's survival. If you made it to the end, like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs it.